Hi, Shirley Bankey here, and today we're going to be painting Seaside Serenity. I think we could all use a little serenity in our lives about now, and I'm not sure if you can see that very good. Okay, so that's the piece we're going to be painting today, and I'm just going to run through the supplies. Now, one of the reasons that I used blues today, again, is because I did a quick run around through all of the art stores or the art supplies, the Dollarama, the Dollar Tree, and different places where you can pick up your paints quite locally. And for some reason, they're not there. The supply is really, really low. I'm just going to lean over here a minute and grab my paint supplies and talk about paint for a minute. Normally, you would be able to run out and pick up these paints at Dollarama or the Dollar Tree. And as I said, their shelves are pretty bare. So I did go to Home Depot and check. Now this has got paint all over it. Can you get a good shot of that? This is their paint that you would go in and get a sample of if you wanted to do, weren't sure what color you wanted to paint your walls or whatever with. And you can get little pots like this for about $5 a piece. You can get larger ones at Canadian Tire, but I do like this size. Now, if you can't find your regular paint that you're looking for, as I said, on the shelves, you can go to Home Depot. Now, what I recommend you do is pick, I'll pull a blue up here. Not necessarily this color, but you'll see paint chips like this on the shelves. What I recommend is that you get the darkest color of whatever blue or whatever color you're going to get. Purchase the darkest color, and that way you can get these condiment cups at the dollar store or the Dollar Tree. And they're just little cups with a little lid on it that you can snap back on. Get yourself some white paint and then mix yourself the lighter shades from the dark. Mix them in these little pots so that you know you've got enough. And make a note on the top of each one as to which dark color they came from. So then you've got a variety of colors. You can also take the darker color, put a little bit of it in one of these pots and put a dot of black into it and tint it just a little bit darker. So that's one way that we can get some paint supplies at this time while things on the shelves are low. So that's your paint. I'll set that up here. What else do we need? Oh, your green tape. Oh, I don't know if you can get a close shot up of that. These are cellulose sponges. There's 2 in a package for not very much money. You get in the cleaning section of the dollar store or in the, department stores or grocery stores. But they're the cellulose sponges, 2 in a package. And the reason that I want you to get them is you're going to cut them into tree-shaped shapes. And then once you get it cut out, over in here, I have, somewhere in there, I have tweezers. And I kind of pluck off the very straight edges. And we're going to use these to do some trees in a little bit. What else do we need? Oh, my favorite brushes. These are Pillsbury basting brushes from the houseware department at Walmart. And the reason I like them so much is the bristles here are very uneven, very regular. You know when you buy a normal brush and they're very, very flat here, very perfect and flat? These aren't. These are very wispy and raggedy, and I like them for doing a lot of work, as you see when I go along. Now, when you get them brand new, they have a tendency for some of their bristles to come out. So I put mine down in the bottom of the sink with the tap running on them, and I take a nail brush, any stiff brush, and I just keep working over and over it and over it until I get all the loose bristles out. You can tell that I use mine a lot. Okay, what else do we need? Let me look at my list here. So I've got everything else on this list, on the printed list that you will receive out, and just follow it down and collect all that stuff into your painting area. Okay, now I'm going to tidy up, get my paints out ready to paint, and I'll be back with you in a minute. Hi, Shirley Bankey here, and today we're going to be painting Seaside Serenity, as you can see here on my table. I've worked mainly in blues with just a bit of whites and grays here today. I realize that picking paints, getting paints right now is pretty difficult. So I worked again in blues. Again, the navy, white, and black will give us all the colors that we need today. I have pre-mixed a light blue, a medium blue, and just a little bit darker medium blue, and then I'll go with my dark navy. So that's 4 shades of blue that I've mixed strictly with blue and white to get my grays, black and white, which we'll get into later. As you can see by these little pots, this way you can mix enough to know that you've got plenty of paint, and you don't have to worry about mixing to get them the exact color again. And these are condiment cups from the dollar store. This is probably Dollarama, and these ones are probably Dollar Tree. Both work perfectly well. Okay, so that's the picture we're going to be painting today, and I'm just going to pull up my next one. Now this I've painted, if you're using a brand new canvas, if you've been able to find one. Oops, I need to move this up. There we go. So just take your canvas, if it's brand new, and mix yourself enough light blue, sky blue, and so the navy blue and white, so that you've got enough to give your canvas a couple of coats of paint. Give it a nice full background, the entire piece. Now, then once you've got it all covered, let it dry. Now make sure you let it dry well between coats. If it's still a little bumpy, you can give it a light sand, then use your tack cloth and give it a light sand and clean all the dust off it and give it another coat of paint. If you're using a canvas that you've used before, you can sand it, sand it as smooth as you can, and again, you can use the tack cloth, clean it off, and give it a couple of coats of your background color. Now once you've got that in place, you're going to take your ruler and a pencil, and you're going to come down 6 inches. And I'm trying to leave this in place so you can see it, but my arms aren't long enough. So I'm going to move it down here. Just give a little tick on each side so you've got your mark there for where you want it. And then you're going to take your green painter's tape, not regular tape. It's got to be the painter's tape so you don't pull that background paint off. Now, get a good bird's eye view on this. I'm just going to stand up and just come across from one pencil tick to the other and put my green tape on. Now, run your hands back and forth across the top of this paint really well so that we get a good seal and we don't bleed underneath. Okay, so now we're ready to start. I'm going to take my lightest blue paint and I'm going to put some of it on my palette. Put my lid on so it doesn't dry up. And I'm also going to put some white out. So I'm all set to go. Don't need a lot of white, just a little. Okay. So I'll move that up. We're just working on the top part now. And I'm going to take, so the brush that I suggested you buy, the Pillsbury brush, these have been well used. So you're going to take this, you want to get it damp. And then put it down and let most of the water come out. You don't want it dripping, but you don't want it dry. Go into your paint, get a good load of your blue paint. We're going to work fairly fast on this skyline. And starting at your bottom, right across that paint, I know it seems silly, you say, it's already blue, why are you putting more blue paint on? You're putting more blue paint on because we're going to put clouds on this, and we're going to work wet into wet. And I'm not being chintzy with it. One of my bristles has come out. There, got it. That's why I use a towel back there. Get to wipe everything off on it. There we go. So get it a good coverage. You want this to be wet. I'm looking down sideways to see any dry spots. Okay, now, as I said, we need this wet. Don't clean your brush. Now I'm going to start with clouds, and I'm going to work up. And I want my smallest clouds closest to this line, and I'm going to get bigger as I go up. And this is going to give us perspective, some dimension and distance in our piece. Just a little bit of white paint, and you're just going to get a little. And then back and forth, and you're doing this into white, into the wet blue. Just a dot of paint on it, and bring it in at a different, and then, now as we go up, you're going to put just a little more paint on. You want your clouds to be just a little bigger. Just while the paint's still wet, you're just going to move them in. Now you're coming up and you're getting even bigger. Just a simple skyline. I kept this quite easy and simple. I didn't want to make this complicated. I've had other classes where they found the clouds were much more difficult than they had anticipated. Now, as soon as this starts to dry, you've got to stop. So as you can see, I've moved from very light, soft, smaller clouds up to a little bit bigger, up to a little larger. And that's going to give us dimension, a little perspective in our painting. Give your brush a good clean. And now you have to let this dry. We can't move forward until this is completely dry. Leave your tape on. We're going to work with, when we go to the next stage, we're going to be working with from there up, and we're back. Hopefully the top portion of your painting is completely dry. And now we're just going to go to our medium blue, put a little of that out and on your palette. And yeah, I think that's enough. And we're ready to put in some mountains. So you'll probably notice when you're out for a drive or out for a walk or looking out into the distance, when you see trees or hills quite a bit farther away from you, you'll notice that they're not much detail to them. You can't see detail, and they're a much lighter, softer color than if you were up close to them. And as hills and trees are closer to you, they get darker in color, they get more detail in them. And that's not always easy to do in a painting, so that your painting doesn't look just flat and one-dimensional. It looks like there's perspective to it. So what we want to do is start with the lightest colors farthest away, and when they're farther away, they almost take on some of the sky colors. So you're just going to take whatever brush you are comfortable with. I love round brushes. I also don't put a lot of pencil marks on my paintings. Sometimes when I'm having a difficult time deciding on where I'm going to put something and just how it's going to fit, I'll cut them out of colored paper and I'll lay them around on my painting. So I keep a file folder full of different cutouts. Sometimes I have to cut new ones, but it works. I'll lay them around. But in this case, so I guess what I'm really telling you is I'm going on here freehand. If you're not comfortable with that, just cut yourself out some paper and lay it around, or get out a pencil and mark in where you want. So I'm going to go to my medium blue, and I'm just going to put some mountains in here. Now these aren't going to be very large because they're farther away. And just fill them in with your medium blue paint, bringing it down over that tape. I think this might need a second coat, but that's okay. So let's just pretend that I've let that dry and I've got a second coat on it. So for time's sake, you're going to need to let that dry. You're going to need to put a second coat on it and move forward from there. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, yeah, you don't have to say 1, 2, 3, just in your head.
Oh, just in my head, okay.
And we need to stop because, let's see, okay. Alright, so you're going to switch it, or you're going to dry it?
Okay.
Yeah, just make sure that you once in a while glance in here to make sure that we are inside the...
Okay. Yeah, because it's throwing me off because to keep it straight on there, I'm on an angle here. But that's okay, we'll figure that out next time. Okay.
Oh, sorry, almost.
Now this is a matter of do as I say, not as I do. For timing's sake here, I haven't waited for this to dry, and I haven't put the second coat on, but let's pretend that I did. You're now going to take your tape off very carefully. Now, you can either throw this out or you can flip it around and move it down approximately an inch and put it back on again. Again, across the top. Don't worry about getting the bottom. Across the top, you're going to get that well adhered into place. And now you're going to go to your next darker paint color that you mixed and put some out on your palette. top on to keep it nice and fresh. I always clean mine off with my fingers. You could clean the edge of yours off with a palette knife if you don't like getting your fingers mucky. Now, to get perspective, again, we want to start, I'm going to do another mountain scene coming down here. And it's going to be two mountains, one behind the other. And I'm going to start with that lightest, I shouldn't say the lightest, the first of the medium blue, the same color that I used to put the other mountains in. And I'm going to start, these are going to be my mountains behind. And I'm just going to kind of get a feel for where my mountains are going to be. You notice that I brought this one out only partially, and this one's a little farther. What I haven't done is have anything end right smack in the middle. That just isn't as pleasant a look. So you're just going to fill these back mountains in with that blue. If I seem a little uncomfortable, it's because I'm used to moving my painting around, but I'm trying to leave it right in the same spot so that I don't, so you can see it better. So this is just a simple fill in. Now, one thing I've done on occasion is I keep, as you noticed, I have a wet cloth beside me for wiping my fingers. I have been known to grab it if I've put something somewhere I don't want to and wipe the whole thing off. And that's the beautiful thing about acrylics. You can either wipe them off if they're still wet, if you didn't like what you did, or you can paint over them. There we go. So that's my background mountains. And do as I say, not as I do again. Wait for this to dry. And then you're going to put mountains in front of it in that darker blue that I put out here. So this was your background color. This is your mountains that are in the far distance, and these are your mountains that are a little closer to you. And I will put out just a speck of the original navy blue. So you can see that there. 1, 2, 3, I've got 4 blues out there. Okay, so as I said, it's always better to let this completely dry, but for time's sake, I'm going to go in with that third blue, and I'm going to put mountains in front of these. And I'm just kind of, because the one isn't dry, it's not, it's blending with the other color. And I'm just going to put this on an angle to make it easier for me to fill in. And I'm using fairly thick paint only. You're going to want to get yours fairly smooth. I'm cheating here just for time's sake. Julietta is doing a fabulous job of recording this, but we don't want to keep her here for 2 days. She'll probably get hungry. Her family will probably want to have her home at some time. I wanted some of those hills in the back to be showing through. just to give you some dimension and depth to your painting. And I'm going to fill that in. Now while this is still wet, pretending I've got a second coat on that, I'm going to go in just slightly to a little bit of the darker blue, the pure navy blue on the tip of my brush. I haven't cleaned my brush, and I'm just going to bring some of it just to darken up and smear it in with the lighter blue, just to give it, especially if I want the hills. And I will bring that up and around, and I'm bringing it up around the top, and I'm bringing it down, and it just, not much. There. Now, let's pretend that we've got a second coat on this and 2 coats on this. You, of course, have taken more time than I have in between. You'll be able to stop and along the way and have a little wee drink and let all of that dry perfectly. And we'll be back with you shortly when yours has dried and mine has dried. And we're back. So hopefully your mountains are totally dry, and if so, then it's time you can take off your tape. There we go. And we won't be using that again, so you can throw that out. Okay, now we want to get some water in here. And I'm going to be using this brush again. The basting brush I'm going to get a piece of paper out here. I want you to take your brush and go into your first blue. Can you see that? Not the light one that you did your background with, but the blue that you did your mountains that are farthest away. Just go in a little bit, not a lot, and then I want you to pitter-patter some of it off on the paper towel so that it's now feather light. I want you just to go back and forth, not very much. You're barely touching your canvas, and you're just getting some water movement here. You know, the ripples in the water. Now this is very simple water, nothing complicated. And as I said, just slightly feathering it across. You're barely touching it. There was barely any paint left on your Now, I've got too much paint over here. I find that that's a bit much. I can now go back into that lighter paint, and I can just kind of come back across and take some of that out. This is the beauty of acrylics. Don't like it? Soften it up with the other. I'm still going to I've got a little more on there than I wanted. And I can even go in with the darker shade not the dark one, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's count that as number 3. I'm barely touching again. I'm just putting some striae of water in there. And I will admit this isn't as easy as it looks. Now I'm going to go into my white. I need a few little ripples of white in here. Any place where you feel you got it too dark, just bring that white over top. Need a little sparkle in your water. You notice I don't go in heavy, and then I always pitter-patter off on paper. Okay, be sure and wash your brush. Now I want you to take your brush and put just a drip of water. If you could come in here, Julietta, and show them what I'm going to do right up close here.
On the canvas?
No, right here. I've got it, my brush is fairly damp, and I'm just pulling out a bit of that paint, and you can see it's now the consistency of Indian ink. It's very mushy. I'm going to get a little of it off on my paper towel. Now I'm going to come in and move this closer to me, and I'm just going to mimic the shadow of the mountain here in the water. And you can see that it's just a wash of color. It's not solid. It's just giving us a bit of a shadow. Duplicating roughly the, and then I can take this and I'm very lightly wisping that across. I've barely got a shadow on there. It's not as much as I want, so I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to do it again. Now I'm going to also do it for these mountains. And I'm going into the watery bit of paint, pulling paint out of that puddle and into the water. And my mountains, I'm just going to, oh, that's better. So this mountain, so now I'm going to fill that in with that watery paint. Now before that dries, you're very lightly going to striate that with that. Your brush is clean, it's not dirty, doesn't have any paint on it. It's not dripping wet, but it is damp. And you're just softening the edges of that to give you, there. And that's it. When that's dry, I think I'll darken that ever so lightly. While I've still got this blue on, I'm also going to come right across on that horizon line so you can see where the sky, and soften that up with your brush. Now you can see where the water horizon line is out there. Okay. While that dries, we're going to go to the next step. I usually don't have to reach that far for my water dishes, people. In here, when I'm trying to set up so that we can get this all recorded for you, I've got things out of sight, so I have to reach a little farther. You'll want everything a little bit closer to you. So while that is drying, I'm going to pull out the original, and I'm just going to lay it on top of there. Hopefully I don't smush anything. And the next thing we're going to put in this tree line. So that is, how far up? I came about 4.5 inches up from the bottom. And how far across did I come? There we go. I came 8.5 inches over. What I don't want, because this is a 20-inch canvas from here to here, I don't want it ending smack in the middle. So, yeah, and I don't want it lining up with that. So, I am going to put a pencil mark. What did I say it was? 4.5 up? Here, and I'll probably put one over here. And I came across about 8.5.
Maybe you want to
Move it up. Okay. There we go. Can you see?
Start again with the 4.5 we've got.
Cool. I came up 4.5, made a tick mark. Came up 4.5, made a tick mark. And then I came across 8.5 and made a tick mark. Now I'm going to take some new tape. And I'm going to run from there over to here. And run my finger well back and forth across that so that it's well adhered. Now, the next thing. I've actually used these cellulose. Can you see those? It's just a package, a 2-pack of those cellulose sponges. This one's been out of the package and it's curved. But basically you're going to, I usually mark it out with a ruler. But today I'll just pretend that I did right there. And pretend I marked it out. And I'm just cutting out a tree shape. Then I'm going to take tweezers and I'm just, that sharp edge cut line along there, I'm just picking off little tiny pieces, not much, just tiny. Oop. You can see them falling on my canvas there. And just making it a little more uneven. I'm going to want to get that off. There we go. So now I have my tree cut out, and I'm going to go into my water dish and I'm going to give it a good wash. Just let me bring this over here. The reason why you want to give this a good wash is they have something in these sponges to keep them soft inside the package, and you want to wash that out. Just go to your sink and give it a good wash after you cut it, and get the whatever it is. It's almost oily. I have accidentally used it without washing it out first, and it's a little strange. Anyway, so now you've got your tree. Put your scissors back away. Now we're going to put in this tree line here. And how I did that, I have it around here somewhere. It is right under here. I've got this left from, I'll bring this out here. As you can see, from doing my original one, I've still had blue paint and my sponge left. So I just put it in the Ziploc bag and brought it with me. So here's my tree. Now I put a puddle of blue paint out and I dab into it, but you don't want this. Oh, can you see that? So I've got a puddle of paint that's smeared out. I've got my sponge saturated, but then I come off to the side and kind of pitter-patter a bit so that it's not real gobby. Now here's the easiest way to make trees you'll ever can imagine. Don't go heavy. Don't go pushing this down really hard. I'm going to do that and then I'm going to wipe it off. Don't push it down so it's like that. Push it so that you're gently putting it on. So here's the one that I've got a bit heavy. And if you keep a damp cloth handy, you can do that. So I'll go in and do that again. Oh, need more paint. Just pitter patter in there and just come in and do your paint. And get your trees, some tall, some short. Some, and just bring it across. And I'll come down to my 8 mark pencil. Now I'm going to turn that upside down and just along the line where the masking tape is, I'm going to get just a little more paint in there. I'll turn it back around. Just come in. Oh, can't see? Yep. And I just do some little shadowy ones back here. Now I'm going to as you can see, I'm not pushing really hard, but I am. Now I'm going to pull up this one again and put it down. I'll put it side by side. Can you see the difference in those trees? And I have a magic brush. And my magic brush is an old flat brush. This is the rattiest looking brush. I'll put it on the lighter background. I'll bring it right up. Can you see it? Oop, whoop, whoop. This brush used to be a small number 4, very expensive flat brush. This brush could be 30, 40 years old. I don't throw any brushes out. It is in such rough shape that the paint is all flaking off this handle and into my painting, so I've wrapped it in tape. But I'm never going to get rid of this brush, and I'll show you why. I always work with a damp brush, so go in and I get it damp, but I get most of the water out of it, and I go into my paint, and I'm going to grab do I have another? Here we go. Can you see the little shape it's making for me? You'll watch here. So I'll go into my, I have a bad habit of getting paint where I don't want it. And I'm pitter-pattering so it's not heavy in paint. And I come up I can get some little branches coming out. Now, you can see that these trees are pretty nice just the way they are. Now, I will be coming in with a second. Once this is dry, I will come in with a second. But I wanted to show you what I do use to get a little more definition, because a lot of people think, oh, that brush is no good anymore. It's history. I'm throwing it out. And sometimes I have forgotten to wash this and the paint is dried in it, and I'm heartbroken. So what I do is I stick it in I have a tall jam jar that I put a little bit of rubbing alcohol in, just the same kind of alcohol that you would use that you probably keep in your bathroom under the counter for cleaning wounds or whatever. It will remove acrylic paints from your brushes. Sometimes if you get it on your clothes, you can get it out with alcohol. Not always. Sometimes it will actually take the color out of your clothes, but it's worth a try. But it definitely will take it out of your brushes. This one, it doesn't matter if I leave sitting in the jam jar on its bristles. If you've got a brush that the bristles are, you need it to be in the shape that it is, you can just wrap it, put a little paper towel with alcohol, saturated in alcohol over it, and it will soften it, and you can keep working it until you get it back. It's pretty hard on the brushes, so afterwards you give your brush a real good wash with a good shampoo same shampoo you'd use in your hair, and then work in some hair conditioner. Again, good hair conditioner that you would use on your hair, and leave that sitting in the brush. Shape your brush into the shape that it needs to be, and you can just leave that sitting in there until you're ready to use it again. Now, once this is dry, I'm going to come in and do just a little more pitter-pattering in there to give it. And you can actually put a tiny bit of black into this paint, and I mean a tiny, tiny bit, and come in with just a slightly darker shade of blue to give these trees a little more depth. Just don't cover them completely. You're just going to pitter-patter the darker shade on. And there are simple trees. They can't be much simpler than that. I will admit that my little magic brush here makes them just a little bit nicer, but I'm sure you've got an old brush in your brushes that you could use to do that. This one just happened. I did give it a little bit of a shape up with a tiny pair of scissors, and get these paints out of my way. There we go. And that's, as I said, as soon as this dries, I'm going to put, here, let's just do that while it's drying. I'm going to move this aside. I'm going to put a little more of the blue down. Then I'm going to put, and I mean a dot of black, not much at all. Just a little. You can always add more black if you don't like the color of it, but if you don't think it's dark enough. But if you put too much black in it, and then you have to put a whole bunch of more blue in it, and then you usually have paint that you've wasted. And you noticed I used a palette knife to mix my paint with. A lot of people go in with the bristles of their brush, and they'll mix that paint. And then when the paint gets up inside the ferrule of your brush, the ferrule is this metal part of your brush. When paint gets up inside there, you end up with a perfect round brush that looks like this. Now this brush also is probably 40 years old, and I haven't thrown it out, and it makes some really interesting shapes, etc. But always use a palette knife. Okay, this darker blue, I've gone into my paint, and now I'm going to pat some of it off. Now, very lightly, not heavy at all. You're just adding a bit more dimension to the trees. Now, I'm going to say, do as I say, again, not as I do. You want to make sure that these are dry before you go in the second time, or the paint will start to lift. I haven't waited for it to fully dry, and there we go. As you notice, I'm just using the tip and just adding just a bit more. There. And we'll slide that back into my Ziploc bag in case I want, and that will stay wet. Now, I don't throw those sponges out. I wash them out when I'm finished. If I'm just using them now, I usually will just throw them into my water dish and let them sit there until I finish painting for the day, and take them to the sink and clean up my water dishes and my sponges. I have been known to leave them sit in there for a while until I switch out my water dishes. Okay, now you can pull off that that tape, and you've got that nice finish to it. Now, while we wait, oh, I got a little dot on there, that's okay. While we wait for that to dry, I'm going to pull up my original again. While we wait for that to dry, I have put 2 birch trees up here on the far side. And we'll get started on those and then come back and finish this off. Now, you've got these, turn these around. This is the dollar store paint. They're decent little paints. They're not the best paints. They don't have the best coverage, but they're a decent little paint. This paint I picked up at Walmart. Again, it's a decent little paint. It's got better coverage. It has, it's thicker, so it's got better coverage. I'm going to be using this paint for the purpose of getting better coverage quicker. But don't go out and buy this extra paint if you've already got this. You're at home, you've got all kinds of time. It'll take however many coats that it'll take to give you good coverage with this. Set that over there. Oh, could you hand me that paint right there? That's flipped upside down. Okay. This I was working with at home. So I'm going to freehand in 2 white birch and get the first coat in. I don't, as I said, I don't have a tendency to put pencil marks in. Now, if you're in doubt as to where you want these trees, cut out some strips of paper out of whatever paper you've got. I didn't bring my strips, but for instance, this is too wide, but you could say, okay, where do I want those trees? What part of, there might be a part of your mountain that you're not happy with that you want to cover. And maybe you want the second one going up wherever. You can decide where you want them to go just by putting strips of paper or a couple of rulers up there. Just don't make them this wide. And I'm just going to freehand mine in with And I was working with this thicker paint at home. I'm going to need more than that. And just put it in this little container so it wouldn't dry out, because I waste a lot of paint. And you're going to put this on here with whatever brush you're comfortable with. Some people like a flat brush. Some people prefer a round brush. I love round brushes. And I'm going to use this very large round brush, but you could use a flat brush as well to put it in. And I'm just going to fill my brush. You didn't see me go into water because I'd already, this brush was, it was still wet from home. Okay, I'm going to start down here. And I don't want this tree to be straight. If you're doing a tree and you think, oh, that doesn't look good, it's not straight, you won't find it straight. Now, something you might want to do while you're waiting for other parts of your painting to dry is go for a walk in the woods. Look at all the different trees that are out there and take pictures of them. Decide what kind of trees you would like to put in there, and go for that. Now, instead of doing these white birch in here, you could also take this and start right from the bottom and have some trees like that come up instead of this. Just keep in mind, this is your painting. You get to put in it what you want. I've tried to do this painting to show you a few different things. And you can also use whatever color you want, or as many colors as you want.
Okay, hold on a second. It stopped automatically. So, I'm gonna start again. So, yes, so
Where did
you
I?
say something that you can use all the colors you want, I believe.
Okay. And as I was, Juliet is having trouble with her camera, so please bear with us. Oh, Julietta was having trouble with some of the cameras, so we're back. I think where I left off, or where the camera
so maybe
dropped off.
We got that maybe. No, just continue and say the...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that way they don't think I'm having problems.
But the thing of it is we're human.
Yes.
And they need to know that. But
Yes.
okay, but I'll start there.
So pretend that you're finishing the other tree. Hold on a second. Let me just put in one. Now.
Now, you can do anything you want because it's your painting, and you can use whatever colors you want in this. I have kept it on the monochrome side, partly because I know how difficult it is to get all the different paints right now. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to use paints that I know some of you already have from the last one that I did. Okay. I'm going to flip this around. I'm trying to keep it very in one place so you can see it, but sometimes I just need to flip it around so I can get rid of these thick lines that I've got on them. I think we just bring. So you can see that these trees are not straight. They're not going all in. And if you go out and look at the trees, most of them won't. So don't get too tied up in how perfect your trees are. Okay. So those are going to need a couple of more coats before we go on and give them some definition, some shape. Okay, put my lid on this, keep it wet for when I'm ready to move forward. Let me get this so you can see it. Now down here, we want some shadowing on the on the water. And to do that, I'm going to be using the navy paint. Get a little more out. Navy with nothing else in it, just the straight navy paint. I'm again going to be using this brush, and I'm going to, the brush is damp. I want it just not dripping. And I want you to take the brush with just water in it, making sure that this is dry, and you're coming down I don't want this drippy. Tip down and look. Oh, that's not quite dry, but oh well. Do as I say, not as I do. And let me see if I've got that too wet. Just want my bristles of my brush with, I've gone into my paint and I'm dibble-dabbling off. And now I'm coming down. And my brush isn't this way. It's this way. It's sideways. And paying attention to the height of the tree you're coming down from, try and line them up so that you're at the same, roughly. Now I've got almost too much water there. So I'm going to take this paper towel and I'm going to wipe that off. I was too wet. I thought I was, and I was. So again, get all the paint off my brush. I don't know, you can't see me doing this because you can't see me. But I'm flipping down and I'm looking at an angle to see how much water. I want it wet, but I don't want it sitting on there. I just want it slightly damp. And you'll see in a minute why. Okay. Got some paint on my brush, but not a lot. Now I'm coming down. This one's longer and this one's longer. And then before it dries, lightly, and I'm barely touching it, I'm just drawing my brush across that. That's what I want. That's better. I was a little too wet out here. These ones are even shorter. This guy's a little longer. Before it dries, you just bring your brush across. Let's see if I can fix these guys. There. We'll let that completely dry. Be sure and wash your brush out well. And let that completely dry. And we are going to add a little bit of white sparkle at the very, very end of the painting. Okay. Now that I've used most of my paper towels, I will get some clean stuff up there. As you can see, when I went on there and I was too wet, and I was able to wipe that off right away. So don't be afraid to keep a damp cloth or a paper towel handy. Things don't always work just the way you want. quickly wipe it off, start again. Okay, at this point, I'm going to let my trees dry. I'm going to sit this down while we do that, and I am going to pull up a small one here, so that I've just got this little one here for you, so that I can demonstrate on this one. I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to pull up. I was working with these at home, so I brought them with me. It's one of the smaller plates. I just trim the edges off so it slides inside a smaller Ziploc bag. But I was working with these this morning, and you can see they're still wet. All of these have been mixed from just black and white. I will lean over here and grab some more, because my lighter paint is nearly gone. Now, I also save these paint bottles. When I go through a lot of these with teaching and doing poured paint, etc. So I just wash them out, and I'll mix a whole batch of colors that I need, so that I'm pre-mixed. I use these, and I use these, both of them, when I'm pre-mixing paints, so I don't have to keep doing it. Now I'm going to go on here, and we're going to give these trees some dimension. To do that, you're going to use, get rid of some of my mess here, you're going to use a flat brush. Now, I think this is the one that I'm going to show you exactly. I've done a couple of things. So my brush is wet. I'm using a flat one. I'm going into my white paint and loading it fairly well. You notice that I'm flipping back and forth and just getting a good coverage on it. I'm going to go in and barely get any of the light gray on it. Now, right now these trees look really flat. So how are we going to go about giving them some dimension? You're going to come in and we're going to curve. I've got putting my brush down right, actually I'm going to turn this around. Pretending, I'm going to work on this upside down. And the reason I'm working on it upside down is I'm pretending that this is my large painting. First of all, you have to decide where's your light coming from. And on this large painting, I'm imagining my light is coming down this way. So you can see, oops, there. My light is coming down here. So this is my light side of the tree. My right-hand side is my light side of the tree, and my left-hand side is my dark side of the tree. So with that in mind, if this is going to be my light side of the tree, I'm going to turn it around so that can you see that? And I'm working towards me. I paint better that way. If you're left-handed, you're probably going to flip it around the opposite way. So how do we get shape to this tree? We're going to give it a curve. So place your brush right on the edge of that tree and curve it around. I'm going to put just a bit darker paint on that, just so you can see the shape that I'm getting. I'm laying that flat part right flat against that edge, and I'm coming in a slight curve. Can you see that? I'm just coming down, and I'm not coming all the way across, and I'm coming in a curve, just a slight C shape. Now that's a bit darker than you're going to want that. And I did that so that you could see it. I've got a little more white paint on there, and I'm just going to come over that and with just the white and just smear it out a little more. That's darker than what I really want that side, but it shows you the shape that I'm trying to get. There you go. Can you see the little bit of a C shape that I'm going down on that tree? That's going to give it dimension. So as I said, I'm just going to go in with white, get my white and the very lightest of gray, and I'm going to come down. I've got this a little more gray. Just laying it right on the edge and bringing it across. Turn my brush over and get more white. Now I'll let this dry, and I might just see how they're not even. I'm just bringing some. So let me do my second tree, and loading well with white, and I'm getting just a little bit of gray on there, and I'm going to start, actually I'll start farther away from you, just doing a little C. Short one, a long one, short, short, long. Now I'm going to come back before it's dry and just blend that out a bit. This side's the lightest side. I think I'll flip that over and get the paint on the back. Okay, need time for more paint. A little bit of gray. And very lightly come back and blend that out a bit. You're barely touching it when you come back the second time. A bit of gray. And I'm working with just the lightest gray right now. I did go in with the darker one earlier just so you could get the shape that I was doing. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be uneven. Just get your shape coming. And then once it's dry, I'm going to come over to the opposite side, to the side that's not in, where the light isn't coming across. I'm going to let that dry. This is, again, do as I say, not as I do. And I'm going into my lightest of gray, loading my brush with the lightest of gray. And now I'm getting just a bit of the medium gray on it. And I'm going to start away from me, laying it, curving it again. I'm going to come back up and soften that down so that my colors kind of blend together. So this is my, now it's still not going to be 100% the way you want it, but again, load with my light gray and just a bit of the, get that nice bit of curve, soften it down, and you're very light with your brush, very light. Now for this brush here, there they are. These two brushes. This brush, I can't even remember what to call it. It's even have a name on it. It's meant for doing things like animal fur. And I don't know how well, I'm going to go right up there. You can see, there we go. Do you see how the very tips of the brush are very sparse? It's been made that way. I purchased this brush that way. And I'll just show you what it does. I'll go in here to my grays so you can see it on white paper. Can you see how it's a hit and miss? So you can do things like fur as opposed to a flat brush, which would be like this, whereas this one is giving you these hit and miss. This we can use on the tree. But I find it very perfect. Now, this brush was a flat brush. It wasn't an expensive flat brush, just a run-of-your-mill, everyday flat brush. And I took little scissors and I just snipped it a little bit and took a few so that it's an imperfect flat brush. And you can see the difference. So I can actually take this brush and go back in and say, fill it again with that gray and just maybe a bit. And you can see the difference as I come across. It's just, it feathers out better as it comes across. Some I'm going short and some I'm coming long. So I'll fill it in, get a bit of gray on it, and just keep coming down. Now remember, these trees actually take, I spend quite a bit of time on these. It's sort of like meditation for me. Once I get going, I don't seem to be able to stop. And I just keep coming back and puttering away at them. And so you can do it with, but even just a plain flat brush will work for you. You don't have to go out and buy a whole lot of new brushes. I will say they're hard to find right now as well. I had a friend say she was into curries and she got the last two rigger brushes they had, scroll brushes, rigger brushes, and then she went to Michael's and got the last one they had. So with this pandemic, either people are painting more or they're not able to get the supplies in that they need. So once you get that in, I also used white and a little bit of gray, and I did the semicircle going up these branches as well. Filled those in. Once you get all those filled in, you will, you can come back with, this is a very fine liner brush. And I've just come back in with, now this color that I'm using here is it's a dark gray that I've made from black and white. It's mainly black with a touch of white in it. It's not black. I haven't used complete black. But you can come in and, you know, do a little wiggle and bring just, and when you do these lines in here, remember to keep them in a circle too, semicircle, so that you get the feel that this is a curved tree, that it's a round tree, that it's not a flat tree. And then I kind of just did a bit of a wash of color up here. And remember, it's acrylic. If it's not exactly the way you want, just add a little more paint. It'll come out just the way you want over time. Just remember, we're here having a good time. We're not rushing it. It may seem that we're rushing it because I've taken a little, you know, moved along on some parts quicker here than what I would if I was in my studio at home. But you are in your home, so you can take all the time you want. But you can see with the lines curving, you've now got a tree that does curve. There we go. Okay, so here is the original piece. And I just want to kind of go over with you what I have done and what I was attempting to do. So when you're putting your sky in, you have smaller clouds down here to medium to larger clouds. And that's going to show you that this is farther away and this is coming closer. This mountain here hits in the, I'll pull up my blues. Here they are. So you've got the light blue, which is your dark brown. Your light blue, which is your background. And then I work some white clouds into it, smaller up to larger, to give you some perspective. This mountain I did in my number 2 blue, the next lightest blue, or I should say next darkest blue. It's farther away. Then these mountains, same blue as that one, and then I came forward onto number 3 blue. It's closer. Then we shadowed in the mountains, so we got some dimension there on the water. Then we put in the trees, brought down the shadowing on the water, and then up went, I did white birch. You can do whatever you would like on those. And remember to get your sea around. Remember, where's your light source coming from? So you've got a light side and a dark side. Don't forget to bring up some branches and then some tiny branches with a liner brush. And the one thing that we haven't done on ours is you can see these little white marks. We did get some in here with that brush, but what you can also do is, where is it? Here it is. I've used a palette knife, and I go into my white paint. I run it through that white paint and kind of dab it off, and then I just run it along. I bring it right along the base of those trees, and that's where the water is kind of coming up. And then I broke up this shadow with just a bit of white, just glinting. You can bring some up here too if you want. If you don't have a palette knife handy, this is a metal one and I do prefer it, but I do have the plastic one, and you can see it will work as well. It just brings it a little thicker, but it'll give you some nice marks straight across, and so you can do that. So what else? Everything is moving forward towards you. Just to give you a bit of perspective, I did a little bit of shading here where the branches meet the trees. This, I've used the dark gray, not the black. I've used the darkest of grays. I've put a drip of water in the edge of the paint so that it's a wash of color that I've put in here. You can do that anywhere you want. You can just putz along on these trees until you get them the way you want. As I said, go for a walk. Look at how they stand, take a picture of them, and go home and work on them. I think I've covered everything. I hope you enjoy this. Take your time with it and write down all your questions, and we'll be back shortly or in a few weeks once you get this completed with a Zoom call, and we can cover off anything that wasn't clear. So happy painting, enjoy, and I hope to see you all soon.